All right, I had to start this one over due to a coughing fit. Whoops. Okay, anyways, we are trying to find a relative maximum for this function g on this interval. Relative maximum, not absolute maximum. If it was absolute maximum, we'd be checking the endpoints. We're just trying to find any relative maxes. So we need to find the critical points. So let's see where this is equal to 0. So g prime of x equals 0. Now we have two things multiplied to equal 0. So we're going to set them each equal to 0. Cosine of x minus pi is going to equal 0, and e to the negative e to the negative 0.1x needs to equal 0. Okay, exponential functions are not equal 0 to equal to 0, so forget that. But this is equal to 0 because the stuff inside a cosine function, if we want it to be equal to 0, it needs to equal pi halves, or it could equal 3 pi halves, etc. So one solution here, if we add pi, would be 3 pi halves. Another solution here would be 5 pi halves. We could also set x minus pi equal to negative pi halves, and that would give us the solution x equals pi halves. We're going to get the same solutions as if it were just cosine, because all we're doing is basically shifting this thing to the right by pi. So we're still going to get the same zeros. So I guess we got to figure out which of these is on the interval 0, 5. Okay, well, pi halves is, because that's about 1.5. 3 pi halves is going to be close, but that should also be on that interval because that's about 9 over 2, which is 4.5. But 5 halves is not because that's 15-ish over 2, which is like 7.8 or something like that. So those are the only critical points that are actually on this interval. So let's now make a sign chart and see what the derivative is doing at these points, pi halves and 3 pi halves. Okay, and see what happens. So I'm just going to cut this off at 0 and cut this off at 5. So calculator might be nice here. That's probably why it says calculator active. One thing I do know is that this is always positive. Okay, so I don't really need to worry about that changing the sign of anything. So I could really just think about the graph of cosine of x minus pi. Now, cosine looks like this, but if I subtract pi from it, I'm moving the whole thing to the right pi. So it's going to look like this, basically. It's going to be essentially the reverse. Okay, so, or not the reverse, but the reflection of it across the x-axis. So that's pi halves there, and this is 3 pi halves. So what that tells me is that cosine of x minus pi is negative here. Then it becomes positive between these 2 points, and then it becomes negative again. And since e to the negative 0.1x is always positive, it doesn't affect the sign. It affects the value, but it does not affect the sign. Okay, so I think, right, at this point, I should be able to say that there's a relative max at x equals 3 pi halves. And that's because g prime of x changes, sorry, I should say relative max, changes from positive to negative at that point. Okay, so relative max at that point because this is g prime. So that means g is decreasing, then increasing, then decreasing. So you can see that I would have a max there. Okay, I think that's it.